The views and opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Natural Bridges Media or KSQD's staff, volunteers, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Talk of the Bay. I'm your host, Len B.A., and I am pleased to present my guest this evening, who is Greg Cotten. Greg Cotten is the founding member of Friends of Hoorastack. Hoorastack is the local indigenous sacred landscape that is threatened by a sand mine. Greg is of European descent and has been working closely in solidarity with the Amamutsan tribal band for the last 7 years. Greg is also a local marine biologist and does a variety of aquatic research. Greg's understanding is that when our culture broke our relationship with nature, we also broke our relationship with indigenous people. Until we heal our relationship with the indigenous people, we'll never fully heal our relationship with nature. Greg Cotten, welcome to Talk of the Bay.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. And I want to start by acknowledging that KSQD broadcasts here in the unceded lands of the Awaswas-speaking Yupik people and the Amamutsan people. And that's where we all, those of us who are within a broadcast range, where we all live. So, Greg, you've been working for a number of years now on trying to protect, among other things, trying to protect this land known as Hoorastack. And can you give our listeners some background? What is that land and what's proposed to happen there?
Sure, yeah. So there's an urgent issue, which could be said as our local Standing Rock issue. And basically the hills behind Watsonville, if you were to draw a line between Watsonville and Gilroy in the southernmost end of the Santa Cruz Mountains there in the San Andreas Fault, that whole area back there is a sacred ceremonial site called Hoorastack, where the indigenous people held ceremonies for thousands of years. And it's now owned by a private debt acquisition corporation, and they are looking to make money off the land and mine sand and gravel from that place. And so we only have about a month to stop it, that sand and gravel mine, and so yeah, that's why I'm here.
And I understand this proposed mining operation is would be around 400 acres, and that they expect over a 30-year period to extract about 40 million tons of sand and gravel, which would essentially remove some hills. I mean, it would just be flattened. It'd just be like like the mountaintop mining we've all heard of going on in Appalachia, but a different version of it here.
Yeah, we've seen there's other areas around here. It's basically just open pit mines, right? So it'll what will be left is just gaping holes in the earth, right? So these hills will be reduced to that.
Mm-hmm. And right now, it is in, I understand, in Santa Clara County, the land itself. Mm-hmm. And so the county government in Santa Clara County has been reviewing proposal to zone it for this, what essentially is an industrial use. And there's an environmental impact report that's been issued regarding the project. Can you tell us about that process, how it works, and where are the steps in the possibility of either turning that project around or having it go forward?
Sure. Yeah. This is the critical point I was talking about earlier. We only have like 3 more weeks to basically vote as a larger community not just in Santa Clara County, although those governing bodies will be the one who will ultimately decide on it. But it's open to this environmental impact report, they call it, is basically a government structure that is needed for any large-scale projects. And what it does is it does an in-depth dive and is intended to be a complete study of the impacts of any project. And they do years of research, and they present the findings after those years of research and to the public. They present that to the public, and then the public has 60 days to review that research, to dig into the details of it, find, if there's any errors in it, or if they agree with it or disagree, and really give the community their main opportunity to make suggestions or point out the failures of the report. From there, they'll take the public comments back to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will vote on, based on the report's findings, based on public comment, and make a determination whether they will vote for the project or deny the permit, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so where we're at now is September 26th is the deadline for public comment, and anybody anywhere can comment on this and can write in an email and can comment on this project, and is encouraged to do so.
Where can people get a hold of that draft EIR in order to look it over and take a stab at it?
So the best place to go is the tribe's website, the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band's website, and that's protecthuristock.org. Protecthuristock.org, and Huristock is spelled Juristac. Protecthuristock.org, and they have all the information on it, and there's an EIR comment section for more information, the email addresses to send your emails to, and of course the EIR itself for people to review.
Right. And so, when we say environmental impact report, we usually think of, the environmental impacts. But there are other impacts as well, particularly for the tribe in terms of affecting their ability to ever possibly access that space for their traditional purposes. But what are some of the environmental impacts that this project presents?
I just would want to insert here a quote from the tribal chairman who says that Huristock is the heart of the Amah Mutsun spirituality and culture, and an open pit and sand mine would forever desecrate this sacred space. This mining project represents a continuation of the destruction and domination that our Amah Mutsun people have suffered for generations. The cultural survival of our tribe is at stake. Mm-hmm. And that's from the tribal chairman Valentin Lopez. So, other environmental impacts that you were asking about are for those that are familiar with the area, the end of the Santa Cruz Mountains. There's also the beginning of the Gabalon Range towards the south, and then the Diablo Range to the east towards Hollister, and basically that is a whole a wildlife corridor where mountain ranges come together. Those mountain ranges are critical for various species, for genetic flow, particularly of things like the mountain lion, where they're few in numbers and cover large ranges. That genetic flow is critical for genetic diversity to keep their species viable and prevent inbreeding and things like that. So not only the mountain lion, but other animals as well. So this area, mm-hmm. because it's at the southern terminal of the Santa Cruz Mountains, it's considered a critical wildlife corridor for many animals.
And that's been recognized by the state. The state is actually just now secured the funding to complete a wildlife underpass under Highway 101 right near that site. It's they've clearly recognized that as an important wildlife corridor because they're prepared to spend quite a bit of money building this wildlife corridor underpass under Highway 101. So we've got confirmation that this is the real deal. Years and years of wildlife surveys have gone into that.
And we know that also the grasslands on the central coast here are some of the most diverse in the world, and this is grasslands habitat. So it's very sensitive habitat. It's important habitat, and really deserves to be protected for many reasons.
And it seems that there's the obvious. If you're tearing apart a mountain in order to get at the sand and gravel and crush, a lot of people think of sand and you think, oh, well, you go to the beach and you collect sand and it's already sand. Mm-hmm. But for these inland mining operations, what they're actually doing is taking sandstone and crushing it to make that sand. And, we consume an enormous amount of sand. It goes into all of concrete, has a significant component of sand. Every pavement type uses a significant component of sand, whether that's gravel on your road or asphalt or concrete. And it's also used in the manufacture of every kind of glass product. It's used in the manufacture of all kinds of masonry products. So it's something that we, I think, all indirectly at least participate in the consumption of.
Yeah, and just to speak to that a little bit more too, right? Then there's also the recycling components of it, right? There's the life cycle of sand is not necessarily. We know we're recycling concrete, we're recycling glass, and of course we know that sand is Herstock is not the only place to find sand.
Right. And it is not. And we have, although in the United States it seems there is more and more resistance to sand mining. There's a sand plant down near the mouth of the Salinas River that's shutting down operations soon. The key here is really how much sand we use. One of the things that happens in these operations where they have to, they're digging up rock essentially and crushing it, is they use a lot of water. How much water use are we talking about here for an operation like that?
Well, the numbers are around 80,000 gallons per day will be pumped from the ground. And
wow.
Yeah, 80,000 gallons per day.
Well, that area already has issues of groundwater receding and of saltwater intrusion. Is that a concern?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a massive concern for pretty much all of us, right? I mean, this is a major agricultural area, and we know that once you poison groundwater with salt water, that's a very difficult thing to reverse. And this is part of the Pajaro River watershed area, which of course we know is under stress.
Wow. And I want to come back to really the cultural resource here and what you read that was spoken by the tribal chairman, that I think there's some provisions in California law that actually protect cultural resources. Is there anything there in the environmental impact report that addresses that?
Yeah, so they have an ethnographic component to the study, and it's around just under 300 pages, I think, which is mostly kept from the public's eye because it addresses... It takes a deep dive into the culturally sensitive areas, burial sites, and things like that, because there's been a history of looting and stuff when this kind of information gets out into the public hands. So, but that has been reviewed. But it's because of the way our culture has kind of evolved over the years, right? And the way we look at cultural sensitivity, we don't have a great history with an indigenous worldview around what you can and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, right? I mean, we see this all the time with the destruction of sacred sites and burial sites, and even the destruction of all the shell mounds around here around the coast, how those have just been carelessly destroyed. So we have the Western culture is a very corporate leaning view on what's acceptable destruction, and this sort of, we could take one way to look at it could be if you were to, if we're talking about a major cathedral in the world and you're just going to like cut off the steps, right? You're going to dig a big hole in front of it, including the front steps, and then say, well, the church is intact, so, that's acceptable. That doesn't, quote, harm the sacred site, right? I mean, that's right. Like kind of an analogy that's really quite appropriate, or you could even draw it all the way back to the altar, right? I mean, it's like, well, the altar's still there. So, so a lot of it is, even though part of it is included in it, there isn't, I think there's a limited capacity for looking at what that cultural impact is. Like, I don't think they get into like historical trauma or like the psychological aspects. I think it's very like the burial site will either be dug up or it won't be, it's like kind of, it's not like, oh, we'll dig up right to the edge of it and your cemetery is like, that's for you to deal with, or, whatever the perspective is. But I think it's quite not appropriate in culturally from a indigenous perspective. This is a ceremonial landscape, and one of the things that the tribal chairman says is that the destruction and domination. This is a quote: "The destruction and domination of the Amamutsun culture, spirituality, environment, and people never ended. It just evolved to the destruction and dominating projects that we see today. When you look at our other ceremonial sites and our hunting, fishing, and gathering places, the vast majority of these places have been lost to development. Huristak is one of the very last remaining undisturbed areas." And again, that's Tribal Chairman Valentin Lopez speaking about that. So, yeah, we often talk about this as a cultural landscape. Again, you can't put a McDonald's up in front of a cathedral or in front of the Louvre and say that, like technically, yeah, that doesn't affect the main building, right? That's the rest is still there, right? It doesn't, quote, destroy it. But there is, culturally, and we know that, there's a bigger view here to consider, and we don't have a great history on really honoring that.
Yeah. If you're just joining us here on Talk of the Bay on KSQD, my guest is Greg Cotten of Friends of Huristak, and we've been talking about both the project proposed for the Sargent Ranch, which would be an approximately 400-acre sand mine, and its impacts on one of the last remaining cultural sites, that is last not yet destroyed cultural sites of the Amamutsun people. Greg, I don't know if our listeners, may not be aware. We all know that, yes, the native people of North America were, largely, lost population, lost land, etc. But a lot of people are not aware that, where in many places it was kind of de facto genocide through disease and, wars of attrition. In California, it was actually state law to wipe the people out. There were state-sanctioned bounties for the scalps of indigenous people. And this was a concerted effort to just remove that population altogether. It got so bad, well, that's bad enough. It was that bad that a lot of indigenous people and their descendants would pretend to be Mexicans, even though that entailed certain kinds of discrimination and oppression, because that was better than being identified as somebody who needs to be killed and can be killed with impunity. So that kind of pattern of what went on in this state has nearly wiped out most indigenous communities, and the Amamutsan people have struggled long and hard to gain a foothold, get some recognition, which they're still lacking federal recognition, and to start to rebuild some of their culture. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about both that history and those efforts to rebuild.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, and that's all we can do. And
yeah.
I won't assume that you know everything about it.
No, well, a lot of what I know is from the tribe and then just the reading, of course. But one of the first financial acts of the state of California was a treasury bond for the extermination and removal of the Indian problem. Mm-hmm. And there was millions of dollars raised through California's treasury bond to fund militias and the payment of the scalps, as you said, for the extermination of the Indian problem. The savages, I think, was the language that they use.
Right.
So that was one of the first things that the state of California did, and that is the absolute and unequivocal definition of genocide. There is no other way of saying it. And that's just from the state of California. That's not even getting into the California mission system or the Spanish, the Rancho period, like that. So, 3 waves of genocide and oppression, and we see it continues today through this sand and gravel mine.
Yeah, that's amazing. That the ability of people to survive something like that is profound.
The definition of resilient.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have a lot to learn from them.
They say the Val, once again, I love quoting Val and lifting his voice up because he couldn't be here today. But one of the things he says regularly about this sand and gravel mine and Huristack specifically is that without these spiritual sites, quote, without these spiritual sites, we lose our purpose for being here, unquote. And that's a profound thing to consider, that mostly we don't have to as settlers, when they, he also, Chairman Val says often that they've been given a directive by Creator to take care of Mother Earth and all living things in their territory. And we've never been given a different directive since. And that's really like they see their calling and their purpose to restore that. And these sites like Huristack are central to that relationship to source, but then also in terms of these critical wildlife areas and being caretakers and stewards of that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have the impression that these were hunter-gatherers, these were primitive people. They just kind of wandered around and took what they needed, without realizing that there was an actually very sophisticated understanding that they had of the environments they were in, and the indigenous peoples of California, what we now call California, participated in very intentional manipulation of the environment, the spreading of seeds of desirable plants, the introduction and support of species that modified, different places. They're, not so much, I don't think, in this part of the state, but in other parts of the state, actually encouraging beavers to build dams, helping them make it happen, and setting fires. where I had someone who has studied fire ecology on this program over a year ago. Apparently, indigenous people set over 150,000 fires a year. These typically were very small fires. They were set at a time of year when they would burn themselves out in short order. But just to put that in perspective, we typically have fewer than, 5,000 fires a year now. And that's only ones that we can't stop from happening. So,
yeah, fire is such a great example of how traditional, worldviews and participation, not only in our community, back with their traditional lands, but just generally restoring that traditional knowledge and relationship with the land. They took in mind not just like how long will the fire will burn, but how will the fire take care of and help develop the plants and the animals in the area, clearing the area for the deer, for the grass to grow so the deer can come in, certain, utility plants and things like that. So they had a much more diverse and broad breadth of view in their relationship with fire, not only, but also in how they used it and what they used it for. It was not just to suppress fire itself, right? There was actually a much bigger purpose and caretaking purpose. And the tribe's website, the Amamutsun Land Trust .org, also has a lot of really great and exciting things that they're doing. And I encourage people to go to the Amamutsun Land Trust website and find out what they're doing with their restoring cultural uses of fire. On top of course, going to the protectherstock.org website to protect this sacred site that's in the Santa Cruz Mountains that's threatened with the sand and gravel mine. But all of these all are coming together, right? As we confront fire as an issue, as we confront like how our relationship with nature, and how we best support it, and then the knowledge that we have and the best practices that we have for that, bringing in and opening up to the indigenous worldview, and giving them the space and the honor and the human rights that they deserve to do this work, is critical in really creating the best future possible for all of us, human and non-human.
Yeah, we're going to take a really short break. We'll be right back with Greg Cotten after this. And you're listening to Talk of the Bay here on KSQD, and I'm Len B.A., and with me this evening is Greg Cotten. He is the founding member of Friends of Huristac. Huristac is a local indigenous sacred landscape that is threatened by a sand mine. I loved what you were just saying, Greg, about that indigenous understanding and how much depth there is to that, that intentional, long-term interrelationship with the local landscape. And this, in the case of this proposed mine, it's proposed on what's now privately owned land, but there is an interesting precedent. Lick Observatory back in the mid-1970s was looking at relocating their facilities to the top of Pimcolam, as it's known to the native people. What's known on most of our maps as Junipero Serra Peak in the Santa Lucia Mountains. That site was selected because it has a very particular meteorological condition that creates extremely clear skies, much clearer than the 6,000-foot elevation of the mountain peak would suggest, and was, considered ideal for astronomical observation. But there was a lot of opposition to that going in, and what kind of tipped the balance was, it turns out that mountaintop is an important traditional ceremonial resource for the Esselen and Salinan peoples of that part of the state. So right now we're facing a situation where this proposed mine, which could consume vast amounts of water, create water pollution, produce a lot of dust, obviously, some traffic, potentially interrupt a critical wildlife route that links the Santa Cruz Mountains with the Diablo Range and the Gavilan Range. In addition to that, obviously, it's would destroy what's an important cultural site. So this EIR that's up for review right now, we have, you said, I think we have until the 26th of September for comments on that.
Mm-hmm.
What discretion does the county have once that comment period on the EIR ends and they're faced with a possible action or not? What can they do?
Well, so, it's so important that the people go on to protecttouristock.org website and make a public comment on this project, because all people can comment, and the Santa Clara County, the Santa Clara Board Planning Commission, as well as so they'll vote on it first. So the Planning Commission votes on it first. Then it goes to, if appealed, which we assume it will go to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Then they'll vote on it. And then if appealed there, it can go into the courts and then be litigated in the courts, which we're hoping we can stop it before then. But what happens basically along this whole process is the public comments are legal documents that are in this report and will travel with this project through all of this decision-making process. And everybody that writes a comment before September 26th, their comment will travel along in this process as a legally required part of the document. And particularly experts in various fields, like law, water, air, culture, really any area of expertise, spirituality, they can comment on it, and if they can reference it with like resources like, in this study it shows this, and you can't do this because in this study, and referencing in detail in their comments, that will be legally valuable resource for, in this process, because one of the parameters of this process is that only what's in the document, which includes public comments, can be used to defend or deny the access, right? That's the full conversation.
Right. Yeah, because when you appeal something legally, what happens is, okay, did the previous body make the right decision or not? You don't get to introduce new information.
Correct.
Yeah.
Same thing here. And so if people comment before the 26th, and they can, especially experts are really great, but all public comments, children on up to, experts, well, even children are experts, right? But we all
Different
are
time.
areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, protecttouristock.org is the tribe's website, and they have all of the information on how people can make a comment there.
And I understand a number of cities have taken a position on this project. Do you know about that?
Very much. Yeah, very exciting. Well, we have Santa Cruz was the first one, I think, to make pass a resolution to protect Huristock. We also have a city of Santa Clara and the city of Sunnyvale and Morgan Hill have all signed unanimously resolutions to protect Huristock, and the city of Gilroy, actually just last week or the week before, has made a unanimous commitment to do that. So 5 regional cities have unanimously come out in support of these very human rights for the tribe.
And that's amazing. I mean, to get a unanimous decision out of a city council these days is tough.
Mm-hmm.
And Gilroy is particularly close to the site. So I think that's quite significant that they would unanimously call for, not approving the project. And I understand there's going to be a demonstration in Santa Clara County about this. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely, yeah. September 10th from 1 to 4 p.m. In San Jose. Saturday, September 10th is going to be a huge day. We're expecting a big turnout and really encourage everybody to invite their friends. This is a tribal-led event, and there'll be speakers, and it's a several-hour thing, and in front of the county courthouse, the McKenty Plaza. This is all can be also find in protecthuristac.org. Right. And Huristac, again, is JURISTAC.org. And that rally is September 10th in San Jose. And yeah, basically this will be an opportunity to hear from the tribe directly and from their supporters. We're also going to have, we'll be presenting the over 20,000 petition signatures that the tribe has gotten to protect Huristac. So it'll be a really big deal, and it'll be, it's just a rallying moment to bring the people together in this effort to, show solidarity with the indigenous rights of Central California and Northern California, and let the tribe know really that we stand with you, we recognize you, we hear you, you deserve rights, you deserve access to your traditional lands, and you're so you can have to restore that ceremonial and spiritual relationship from where you and your family have come from for 15,000 years. And so it really is the opportunity for the community to rally around the tribe and to stand with them and bring friends. I think it's going to be an amazing time, and I think it'll be one of the most important cultural events for a very, very, very long time. I want to say like a lifetime, like generation, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from an indigenous point of view, this is not, it's not just, as it were, solidarity with the tribe for their own well-being, but for the land itself.
Correct.
Which, of course, from that the indigenous perspective, the people and the land are inseparable.
Right.
And you had made a comment in what I read about your background. You said, that we broke our culture broke our relationship with nature. We also broke our relationship with indigenous people, or you could say, in a sense, with our own indigenous selves.
Also.
And I wanted to explore that a little bit.
Okay.
Because I am personally inclined to agree with you. And for some people, I think maybe that's just sounds like a strange idea or something. But I think it deserves further discussion, because we know that in the background of all the peoples who came into what's now Europe and then ultimately spread and, tried to colonize various other parts of the world, including the one we live in now, we know that there was trauma in their background. We know that there was loss, and that everybody came from some indigenous root somewhere. And in many cases, for most of us, we either just don't know what that root it was, or it's kind of, we avoid looking at that. We avoid investigating that. So, so I wondered if you wanted to explore that topic a little further.
Sure, we could give it a shot.
Yeah. I don't know your background, or how did you come to a commitment to working in solidarity with the Amamutsan people as someone who is not of the tribal group?
Well, let's see if I can make this as brief as possible to get back to the most important topic at hand, which is the sacred site. But it's all together. But I think that I've since a young boy, I watched our culture destroy unceremoniously the natural world around us, right? Grinding up paving paradise to put up a parking lot, right? That whole saying, and just destroying habitat after habitat after habitat, and just so as you said, unceremoniously, like without, as if it were just to no effect.
Yeah.
Right. And so that to me was like a bit of a trauma, right? Like, how can we just pave over these ponds and these lakes and cut down these forests and this whole habitat and all of these animals, right? I mean, we're seeing the elimination of so many species and the extinction of so many species because of this kind of this mentality. And I just really became part of my life's work I eventually went into the ocean and really studied marine biology, and and water is my focus now. But that's sort of where I began. But of course, I quickly, and observing and sort of being a student in life, you can kind of see how where did we sort of unceremoniously start consuming nature and to our own demise, right? And I just kind of looked at that for myself and just kind of rewound time, really. I mean, you can just look back through history and be like, okay, well, the indigenous culture traditionally has a very strong relationship with nature, right? And then there was a break, clearly, because we didn't just magically get to this point. So if you just kind of look and kind of in your mind's eye wind it back in time, you can kind of see like, okay, well, where colonialism kind of began and the separation of our spirituality with nature, right? And we it's no longer, even though I think we still identify our spirituality I think we find spirituality with nature, right? Like when we go to a forest, I think there's some spirituality that most people experience there. Or when we go to the beach, there's like a deep moving, resonance or something there that I say is spiritual.
Yeah, you see a beautiful sunset, or you experience, seeing the Milky Way at night, or, whatever it is, standing next to a waterfall.
Yeah.
And something happens.
Yeah.
And it's visceral. It's not just like,
and yet we still struggle, and we struggle to find the words that communicate what that is, right? Like, what is that feeling that I feel? We don't have a lot of language around that experience, or we don't have a lot of language with like, wow, that tree in particular moves me. Mm-hmm. But why? And what is that, right? Like, we're quickly muted in our capacity. And I say that's all part of this break, right? From this cultural break that we have with nature. Mm-hmm. And really, I think the indigenous people, which you can hear, I think oftentimes, right, they have more facility with the kind of language and the relationship with those experiences, and can speak more richly about it.
Right. And even the word indigenous, the root meaning of the word is like of or pertaining to a place. Like that, it's that connection to a place that essentially defines being indigenous. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we all, of course, came from at some point in the past. But there's been so much, sort of succession of empires and conquests and migrations and many of our ancestors were refugees from one oppressive situation or violent situation or another. And so, I'm speaking as somebody who is, as far as I know, 15/16 of European extract. So, it's that's,
and it's worth saying too that the tribals say it also, right? That they've been colonized, right? They've been this cultural invasion, I'm going to use that word. There's the water that they kind of swim in now to no small degree.
Sure.
Their displacement, trauma inside of all of that also. But so they'll say that, right, they themselves, that historical long and that those relationships with the plants, the relationships with the water, are literally hanging by the thread, right? This is where the tribal, like, cultural survival is at stake here, and with this sand and gravel mine. And so this is why it's so important for people to write a comment, to go to the website, to write a comment, and to stand up with the tribe, because they want to. They haven't lost it all, thankfully, and they're pulling it back together through various means, with archaeology, with their oral histories, and these other various avenues, and they're restoring their ethnographic understanding with this territory that we are living on, right? And they're committed to and are working with restoring native plants and working with the land again, and fire, as we were talking about earlier, and their traditional use of fire. Right. And so this is why it's so important, is that their commitment, I mean, selfishly, they want to dive in and figure out the best way to take care of these plants, and they have 15,000 years of family history doing it. And so that commitment will produce great results, phenomenal, transformative results for all of us, really. And of course, they need help to do that, as they've said, right? You'll notice there's a lot of stuff going on, and we need help to take care of Mother Earth and this territory. But Huristock is ground zero, right? Like this is their most sacred site. This is where spirituality and the environment and their ancestors and their identity come together. And having an intact space to source from will be, whether or not their culture survives, and to the extent that it does, and their capacity to do so, and the quality of it. Not to mention, of course, like, are we gonna let this happen? Like, this is Central California. Mm-hmm. This is really a Standing Rock issue. Like, if are we gonna allow the desecration and the destruction of the indigenous people's most sacred site? Like, is that who we are?
Right.
That's the question.
This is very literally the destruction of that area. When you start tearing a mountain apart to get sand and gravel, and you have to use very significant amounts of water for that process to grind it up and transport it and all of that, we're not talking about like, build a few houses on a slope or something. This is like literal
digging,
destruction.
Pits hundreds of feet deep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is like, are we any different than the North Dakota folks who allowed like this pipeline and this whole thing to go through? Not to like point fingers, right, or get weird, but really we are really faced with a cultural reckoning moment of, who are we? Who do we say we are? And unfortunately, our government structure is not designed to support, the environment or indigenous people. So it really does require the community to come together, to talk to each other about, to review the environmental impact report, to write an email in saying we cannot have this sand and gravel mine happen. Come to the rally on September 10th in San Jose. Go to the website protecthuristock.org. Protect Huristock, and Huristock is JURISTAC.org. Information about the rally is there. Information about the EIR is there. We have only until September 26th for the community to write in their letters. Basically, after that, the voting booth is closed. So get in your comments before September 26th, and spread the word. And join us on September 10th for the rally. It's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, and there are links for making comments on the EIR at that website, protecthuristock.org. We're looking at something this is an area that's kind of quintessential California. It's the rolling hills with the oak woodland and several creeks. I believe there's a let's see, the Sargent Creek, Tar Springs Creek, Sycamore Creek, and of course the Pajaro and San Benito rivers are all, their flow would all be affected by this project. And, we talk a lot about, those who pay attention to environmental issues talk a lot about protecting the waters. And I can't think of anything more directly impactful than protecting the waters of this site, along with the other benefits, and the urgency for the Amamutsan tribal band to be able to access this area, which is really the last remaining thing that even approaches being in a pristine condition, a pre-colonial condition, if I could use that phrase.
Yeah, and they had indigenous people came from as far as Yosemite to hold ceremony. This is a regional ceremonial center. So this was accessed by many, many people and many tribes. The Big Head ceremony, or the Big Head, Herstock means place of the big head. And so this is a ceremonial center, not just for the Amamutsun tribal band, but also much larger region. Too, people would come for healing ceremonies. So it's both terrifying and really exciting, because if we can imagine, an eco reserve that's stewarded by the indigenous community in this county, or behind Watsonville, right? I mean, imagine an eco reserve that's stewarded by the indigenous people, right? And restoring indigenous voice, knowledge, art, it's sadly missing from our culture, right? How often do you see communications from the tribe, or artwork, or hear their names, or anywhere? And this is an opportunity to really turn that page and shift our relationship, and really also build a future for climate resilience. Just, also getting back to the ecological and animal aspect, is that we know the droughts are coming. We know that everything is going to be stressed, or is already stressed. Destroying these natural resources where waters are flowing, where, tree frogs are there. There's salamanders. There's all kinds of, the diversity is stunning. Actually, I had no idea how much was there,
elk,
even in the mountains.
Elk and puma, and
badgers. The badger. Have you seen the badger that's in these mountains? This black and white striped badger. It's amazing. I thought this looks like it's from Africa.
They're
something.
Fierce creatures. They're amazing.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot, but it's really an ecological gem, right? And again, going back to the wildlife corridor aspect, this is a thoroughfare for two other mountain ranges. So 3 mountain ranges come together in this corner, and this is and this mine will significantly impact that. And we talk about light pollution,
talking 400 acres of destructive changes
forever.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think I don't hold me to this because I'm bad at remembering sometimes details. I think it was the Pomo tribe that early studies in the early 1900s. Ethnographers were trying to capture what they could capture of what was left of the California tribes, and there was one tribe in Northern California, not this one, but somebody north of the Bay. And I think it was the Pomo, where they said that the average adult knew the uses and habitat of over 100 plants. And these were, food plants, medicine plants, fiber plants, right? How many of us know 3? You know what I mean?
Or 1.
Yeah, right. So it's it's pretty interesting, when we talk about, this indigenous culture, and they know what they're connected, they really are connected. And the other thing, I just want to revisit this as a theme, because I've learned a lot actually from interviewing guests on this show about private equity companies. This land, the Sargent Ranch, happens to have been bought by a private equity company. And what private equity companies do is they typically buy something when it's in an financially distressed or undervalued condition, and then they try to maximize the value and flip it. They don't invest in the properties. They don't, generally speaking, I mean, there's detail on all of this, but as a general rule, they're not about creating new productivity or new product. They're just about buying stuff, consolidating it, and flipping it. We have that going on with the Watsonville Hospital right now. We have that going on with rental housing throughout the state of California and really throughout the United States. And they're doing it with the Sargent Ranch. They're trying to extract the most profit on the land by what they think will be the most profitable use, a sand mine.
It's from San Diego, a company from San Diego. This will produce 15 jobs and sand. That's what we're talking about.
And consume
at most 15 jobs,
and consume almost 100,000 gallons of water a day. Right. So there's a lot at stake. Well, we have about a minute left, and so I want to first thank you, Greg Cotten, for being here on the show, and ask you to just make a closing statement here to remind our listeners where they can get more information and how they can participate.
Thank you. Yeah. So really exciting time. We have protectherstock.org is the tribe's website to find out all the information you need to know. That's protectherstock, JURISTAC.org. Major rally happening on Saturday, September 10th in San Jose. You can find more information about that on the website. Just encourage everybody to show up and show the tribe that Central California stands with them. We're not going to let them destroy their most sacred site. We're committed to their culture and their spiritual survival or cultural survival, and we stand with the wildlife corridor. Yeah, protectherstock.org again for more information on the rally. The public comment period ends on September 26th, and that's a critical point. So you can find more information on the website there. September 26th is the deadline, basically your deadline to vote on this. Send your letters and emails to Santa Clara County. Those addresses are on the protectherstock.org website. And yeah, thank you for the time for this conversation. And yeah, look forward to seeing everybody at the rally.
Great. Thank you, Greg Cotten. It's been a real pleasure.